Bienvenidos, Ushamdi, and welcome to this Hut8 networking Techtorial on basic ASA configuration. In Module 4, we're going to be taking a look at remote management access and how we can actually access the ASA in a means other than using the console port. So, to bring us up to where we're at, we've got our ASA, whether it was out of storage or off of eBay. We've recovered the password. We've cleaned up the file system. In some cases, we may have even formatted the disk 0 or flash file system, starting from absolute scratch. We've been able to upload the correct ASA image to our ASA, depending on whether or not we've got 256 megs of DRAM or 512 megs of memory. And we looked at actually 3 different ways that we could try to walk through and configure our ASA. We could do the prompts, we could do the factory default setting, which is where we also receive some default settings that you would get if it came straight from the factory. And then we wiped everything out and started from scratch. And we're actually going to do that again one more time here when we start to look at remote management access. So in other words, non-console access, how can we make that happen? Well, method 1 is going to be Telnet. Now, as soon as I say that, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to tell you, not only is it not recommended, do not use Telnet. And we're also going to see, you'll see in some, even in some recent documentation, you'll see that it will tell you, oh, you can simply Telnet to the ASA and log in with the password of Cisco. And while that may have been true in some of the older releases of code, that is definitely not true with the newer releases of code. And so this is the command, or I should say, this is the setting that we need to configure in order to allow Telnet access to the ASA. So let's jump on the command line here. We've actually got quite a bit of connectivity that's been changed. So now this ASA here, this is the ASA that has 512 megs of memory that's running 924 code. So we're going to say interactive prompts. No, I'm not interested in the interactive prompts. So let's go ahead and throw some basic settings on here and get connectivity set up. Now, one of the nice things is that I have connected this, my iMac here, directly into this firewall so that we can see things in a little larger scale in terms of the print. I will be going back to this window here, but literally it will be to demonstrate that with the 847 ASA code that you can simply telnet into the ASA with a password of Cisco, right? So I'll use this window, but watching the video back yesterday where I used this window's a little bit small, so I'm definitely going to minimize the amount of time we spend here because it is probably very difficult to see on whatever device you're watching this on. So let's go ahead and come back here. Let's kick off a ping. I'm going to stay with 10.0.0.254, and that's going to be the inside IP address that we're going to use on this ASA firewall. So again, we are a totally clean slate here. I say EN, I hit enter. There's no enable password. If I was to say show run, you can see we've got the default default host name. The Ethernet 00 interface is shut down. Like all of the interfaces are shut down. We have no settings at all here. So let's start from scratch. So first things first, we're going to say no, but then I'm going to get an enable password in here, right? So we're going to say enable password, and let's just go ahead with, oops, sorry, I didn't want that. Enable password Cisco, right? Let's change our host name. We're going to make this ASA-512MB-01, right? Because this is our 512 megabytes of memory ASA. We're going to be generating some crypto keys, right? Because we need to do some SSH work here. So if I was to say, right, and you can see I'm leading us up here to a failure. If I was to say crypto key generate RSA modulus, and we'll go with 1024 and hit enter, what error do you think I'm going to get? Or am I going to get an error, right? And it's very similar to what you see in terms of the command, and it's going to work just fine, right? Now, if I was to do that on a router, right? If I was to come over here to what is ostensibly router 12, and if I was to say, go into global config and say crypto key generate RSA modulus 1024 and hit enter, it's going to tell me I need to put the domain name in first. Now with the ASA, you can see we didn't have to do that. You can also see that it gave us this default RSA key. If I was to take a step back here and say crypto key generate and do a question mark and then say RSA, and let's see where it's at here. Okay, now general keys. So this key pair that we're going to be creating here, right? By default, it's going to have this name, this default RSA key. I can label, right? I can create a label, and it lets me do up to 128. So I'm going to say master dash crypto, crypto dash keys, right? So that would be my master crypto keys, and then I could put my modulus in here, 1024, and it's going to go ahead and generate those keys. So if I was to say show crypto keys, and what do we have here? My pub key, RSA, right? You can see that we've got this default RSA key, but we also have this master crypto key, and these are just general purpose keys, right? So again, you could name the key right out of the gate if you so chose. So we've got the key created. We don't have to do the domain name, but we might as well put the domain name on here. So let's go ahead and say domain name hut8.com, and we'll hit enter. And we've got the enable password on there. So as of right now, right, we are actually ready to go ahead and dive in to the interface configuration. Now remember, an ASA 5505, all of the interfaces are layer 2 interfaces. In order to get layer 3 functionality, we need to create the switched virtual interfaces, right? Those software-based layer 3 interfaces on the ASA. So we know that we've got interface VLAN 1. In fact, if I was to say show run interface VLAN 1, we've got this. Now, a quick note, we don't have to use VLAN 1. I can use another VLAN number if I so chose. So let's do that. I'm going to say interface VLAN 99. And that is going to be our inside layer 3 switch virtual interface on the ASA. And I would do the same things here. And so you can see I'm pinging over here, right? And it's not working, right? The pings are failing. So, and this is going to be to show you that if I was to say IP address 10.0.0.254, right? And we'll put our subnet mask in here. If I hit enter right now, and if I say no shut, even though it's not shut by default, should this work, right? Well, let's come back over here. No, it's not working. And I'm directly connected into this ASA. So maybe I'm forgetting, and again, I'm kind of like showing you some errors here, common mistakes that get made. Oh, well, I forgot my security level. So I'm going to go ahead and say security level 100 because this is going to be my inside interface. Did that solve the issue? No. So I've got the security level. Let's go ahead and say show run interface VLAN 99. So I've got my security level. I've got my IP address on there. If I say show IP address, you can even see, right, that for the SVI, for VLAN 99, that the information is in there. Okay, that's right. I forgot that I've got to assign it to an interface. And so in this case, it's interface Ethernet 01. I'm going to say no shut, switch port access VLAN. And so this is why it's good to be in the habit, even if you're playing around with VLAN 1, it's good to be in the habit of saying that switch port access VLAN 1. Because when you come in here, remember, we've got to assign this layer 2 port, right, to the VLAN in which that layer 3 switch virtual interface, the SVI, resides so that we can route, right? So that that SVI is going to be able to route the traffic on the ASA for us. So now I've got the port, it's no shut, right? If I was to say show run interface Ethernet 01, you can see we're in VLAN 99. What about my pings? Well, No, still not working. And you probably figured it out by this point. We'll say show run interface VLAN 99. What have we not done? And I kind of like the way that it leaves that no name if in there. It left the no security level in there and the no IP address, kind of prompting you that, hey, these settings have to be on this interface or else this SVI is not going to work. So if I was to go back into interface VLAN 99, and if I was to say name if, and remember, inside I can name it anything I want as long as it's less than 49 characters. And so if you're naming interfaces with 40 or more characters, you may want to look at shortening those names. And again, for simplicity's sake, I'm simply going to call it, inside. Now, that is what was missing from excuse me. And let me make sure I'm in, is it Ethernet 01? Let's say show interface Ethernet 01. Yeah, and I am in that interface. Can I ping 10.0.0.10? And let's see here. And now I'm wondering if I plugged this into the correct interface. Give me 1 second here. Show run interface Ethernet 01. All right, show run interface, or show run interface VLAN 99, inside security level 100. And so we should have connectivity. Let me make sure that I actually plug that into the correct port. So hold on just 1 second here. All right, so again, fortuitous failure here. You can see I was pinging 10.0.0.10, expecting a response, not realizing that on this iMac that I'm on, I used 10.0.0.11. Had I looked over here at this window, you could see that, I mean, we're like 650 pings in. So the toughest problem to troubleshoot, right? And that's why I leave my errors in here. So the toughest problem to troubleshoot is the one that doesn't exist. This was an operator error. I'm pinging this address here. It's not working. And I'm like, wait a minute, this should be working. And thinking that maybe I left something else out. But here's the problem right here is I was pinging the wrong address. So the iMac is 10.0.0.11. The MacBook is 10.0.0.10. Try to keep things straight here. So again, we're fully functional here. Show run interface VLAN 99. I can ping that inside address. And so at this point, right, we're ready to go ahead and do the outside interface. If you remember here, right on the outside interface, which is Ethernet 00, and we can make that any VLAN, or so, yeah, we can make it any SVI that we want. So let's say interface VLAN, let's just say 100 for the sake of argument. And again, remember, we need all of those settings in here. So name interface, we'll simply call it outside, right? And it sets the security level by default. And now this is where we get into the IP address DHCP, and I'm going to put the set route in here and hit enter. Now remember that this is connected to this router over here, which is this ISP router. So if I was to say, whoops, let me transition back to the correct window here. So if I was to say show IP address, we would see that if we had an IP address assigned, that it would be there. Now remember, what haven't we done? Exactly. I need to get into interface Ethernet 00, and I need to say switch port access VLAN 100, and we need to make sure that we no shut that interface. So if I say show IP address now, take a look at that. We have now picked up that DHCP address. So what do we look like so far? Right? So we've got Ethernet 00, which is our outside interface, Ethernet 01, which is our inside interface, and then we've got VLAN 99, which is for the inside, and VLAN 100, which is for the outside. Now, when we look at these interfaces here, right, what are they lacking? So if you were to just see this, could you tell whether this was inside or outside or DMZ? Maybe it's your management interface. I mean, how do you know? Right, exactly, you don't. So what can we do to an interface? We can throw a description on here. So unsecure, ****, outside interface. right? Let's get into interface Ethernet 01, and let's say the same thing, or not the same thing, but we'll put a description on here, and we'll say secure inside interface, right? If I had interface Ethernet 02, and let's say that this was our DMZ, well, let's put DMZ interface in here, right? So you get the idea. So now when I say show run, there's no question here that Ethernet 00 is unsecure outside interface. Ethernet 01 is secure. It's my inside interface. Maybe I've got my DMZ. Ethernet 03 could be your management, right? So again, just a quick review. I wanted to go over the basic settings one more time to kind of bring us to where we're at now. It never hurts to go over these things. And again, we've got that DHCP information. All right, so now we're all about how do we get non-console access. So in other words, from here, right, from this route or from this iMac that I'm on right here, how do I telnet possibly over to 10.0.0.254? Now we're going to let this run for a second because it just sits there, right? It's just going to sit there for a while because there's a few things that we need to configure over here in order to set this access up. Now, I'm going to tell you immediately, as soon as I tell you that you can do Telnet, I'm going to tell you the same thing. Do not use Telnet. And this, I would say, even if it was inside of an IPsec, tunnel you're coming across, you should be using SSH, right? Without a doubt, you should be using SSH. So how do we enable Telnet access? Well, the first thing that we need to do is that command that we saw from the slide is Telnet followed by either the subnet or the exact IP address of the host. Because if I was to say 10.0.0.0 and then put a /24 here, theoretically, and again, this is 924 code, and we're going to come full circle as to why this doesn't work, right? It's not going to work with 924 code. But when we look at the 847 code, it will, right? Again, newer releases of code, this doesn't work. But that is the command that I would have to run to enable Telnet. Now, the problem with this is that I'm allowing access to all 254 usable IPs, right? So anybody on the inside, which could be, HR department, maybe it's marketing, the engineering department, they're all going to be able to try to be able to access this ASA. So now here's where we're going to transition back to this window here, right? Now this MacBook is connected into the 256 meg ASA, which is this ASA right here. So we're going to say no. We're going to get into privilege exec because there's no password. Again, totally blank config. And I'm going to quickly move through the configuration. So interface VLAN, and we'll keep VLAN 1 here. IP address 10.0.0.254. Whoops. And let's get in the 255.255.0. We're going to say no shut. We're going to go into interface Ethernet 00 is the interface I'm plugged into here. No shut, switch port, access VLAN 1, even though that is the default. And we've got, let's see, can we ping 10.0.0.10, which is the MacBook? And it doesn't appear that it is. Let's check this MacBook out here. Let me make sure we're looking good here. All right, whoops. So it's there. Let's say show run. Did I not? Ethernet 00, that's definitely the port that I am plugged into. Oh, and so again, very common thing. What did I forget? Right, exactly. I'm in such a rush here that I forgot to put in, and actually we'll save that for last. So we'll say security level 100. Oops, sorry, interface VLAN 1. Interface VLAN 1. And we'll say name if inside, and then it puts the security level at 100, and it also solves our problem, right? So again, fortuitous failures, right? Leave the mistakes in here. You're in a rush. You're trying to configure something so that you can see that these are the common mistakes that individuals will make, right? Forget to name the interface, forget to put the security level on the interface. So we've got it in there, and I can ping. So watch this. What if I were to say, Control C, what if I was to say Telnet 10.0.0.254? What happens? Nothing, right? Because remember, I still, right, I have to have that command, that telnet 10.0.0, and I'll make it so that it's only, make it a /32, right, so that only the host 10.0.0.10 on the inside interface can use telnet to connect to the ASA. So we'll run this one more time, and look at that. We get a password prompt. I haven't even configured a username on this ASA, Cisco. And look at that. I'm in privileged exec mode on this ASA. Now, this was a great thing for Cisco to remove from the default, right? Because again, I didn't configure a password. It doesn't ask me for a username, but yet all I have to do is telnet to this ASA and it lets me in. Now remember, and I'll transition back to this window here, we're running 10.4.7.31. I'm sorry, 8.4.7.31, right? Which is definitely an older version of code. If we come back over here and I type in this telnet 10.0.0.0, and I'll make it so that the whole /24 can access it via the inside interface, you can see the operation timed out here. Let's try it again. And for some reason, it does take, I'm directly connected into this ASA from this iMac, but it does take some time here for some reason. But if I come back over here, let's check our version. You can see that I'm version 9.2.4, right? And that's the most recent version for an ASA with 512 meg of DRAM or 512 megs of memory. And again, we are going to get the prompt. It will, and there we go, just perfectly timed. So it gives us the login prompt. But when I type Cisco, it's not working. Right? I hit enter and it doesn't work. It's not that it's no password or that it's Cisco. It's that with the more recent versions of code, it doesn't work. And this is a very smart thing to get rid of, right? So in other words, what would have to happen is we would need to start talking about AAA authentication and creating local, right, local user accounts, unless we're, set up with a TACAX or, an ACS server of some kind. So, but we're going to be dealing with local accounts here, right, because I don't have an ACS server. So again, key takeaway with Telnet, number one, don't use Telnet. Number two, if you've got older versions of code, you might, if you've enabled Telnet, the default password is Cisco, right? Very easy to get in. On the newer versions of code, like 9.2.4, it is not going to let you in with that default password of Cisco. You would have to go ahead and set up a local user account. And again, we're going to be looking at AAA and SSH, right? That's where we want to be. So again, just to quickly bring us up to speed, we're all connected to both ASAs. We've got reachability from the inside on both. We've done some basic configuration settings. We've created some crypto keys. We're going to need to do that for the SSH piece. And we've talked about why you should not use Telnet and the differences between the older code and the newer code with respect to that default password of Cisco that does not exist on the newer code. So now let's transition to method number two. This is, without a doubt, this is your best practice. This is how you should be connecting via if you want to get the CLI access, this is how it should be done, and that is with SSH. Now, we need to configure SSH just like we did Telnet, and we should always be using version 2. And again, a key consideration is you have to generate those crypto keys, right? So the crypto keys which we've already generated here, right? Those need to be in effect. So let's come back over to this ASA, right? And let's go ahead and say SSH. And if I do a question mark, you can see that we've got that same sort of, either IPv4, IPv6 network address followed with the prefix length or the subnet mask. And then we've got timeout and version. So if I were to say SSH version, it's going to be 1 or 2. And just like on your ISRs or your ASRs or your switches, you want to be using version 2. We also want to go ahead and make sure we put a timeout in there. I'm going to make it 9 minutes. And actually, if I pull this back, you can see It's the idle time. It's the number of minutes. So after 9 minutes, if there's no activity, the SSH session is going to be terminated. Now, this is where we're going to hit the point where we're going to be missing something, right? Remember I talked about like that AAA authentication, or at least some sort of a user account in order to connect. And so let's see what happens. Let's look at the behavior when those things aren't here. So if I come over to the iMac here and I say SSH over to 10.0.0.254, right? You can see that it's going to sit here, it's going to think, because we've enabled, or I'm sorry, we haven't enabled, I forgot to put that in there. So let's get this in here, 10.0.0.0 inside. So we've got that command on here. Let me do this again. And so you can see that I've connected to it. Apparently I connected to it previously. So let me do a quick clean up here. Let's get into SSH and I'm going to rm known hosts. There we go. And all I did, and to give you some background of what happened here, I've connected to this this ASA before via SSH from this iMac. And so what happens is the host on which you SSH from, right, is going to keep the keys in this known underscore hosts file in the .ssh directory, which is a hidden directory in my home directory of Travis P. Bonfili, right? So I'm just, instead of going into the known host file and removing just that key, I'll just wipe out the entire file, because now this iMac is going to say, well, it's going to give you that prompt that you sometimes see. If I were to say SSH 10.0.0.254, you get this prompt here, which is basically saying, hey, this is the RSA fingerprint. Do you want to go ahead and, when I say yes, it's going to put it in that known hosts file. Now, you can see that by default, who does it think I'm trying to access the ASA as? Yeah, my username on the iMac, because if you don't specify the -L, right, which is, you know, who are you trying to connect as, it's going to take whoever you are and use that. And so there is no user, and you can see it wants a password, so we'll just type in some junk and it's going to give us 3 attempts and then that's it. So if I was to go into SSH, and again, this is just a short sidebar here, there's that known hosts file, and that's what's in there, right? So it keeps track of the IP address as well as the RSA public key that we get here from the ASA, right? And that's why there was a different key, it didn't recognize it, and so then it's checking this file and saying, wait, you're trying to connect to 10.0.0.254, and I've got an RSA key, but it does not match the key that that device is giving me, because again, we generated new keys. So back to the task at hand. We've got the SSH command in here. Whoops, and that's not what we want to do. We've got our SSH command in here. In fact, let's say show run include SSH. So there we go. We're saying that we can connect via the inside. We've got the timeout for 9 minutes here. We've got the version is 2. And the key exchange group, Diffie-Hellman group 1, SHA-1, right? So all of these things are set, and this is what we need. However, remember, I need an identity. I need some sort of local user account. So we'll say username Travis, password, and we'll just say Cisco, right? So if I say show run, include username, you can see that we've got this encrypted password here of Travis, but we know that the password is Cisco. So now let's come back over and let's say SSH -L Travis to 10.0.0.254. So we have to have, and we'll say CISCO, and you can see it's getting denied, right? CISCO, not working. And here's why. We need to authenticate these local accounts, and we need to use AAA. Right? And so again, you don't say AAA new model. There is no AAA new model command, right? So we're here by default that we're going to be using, whoops, AAA authentication, right? So we're going to say AAA authentication, and if I do a question mark, you can see we can do it for Telnet, right? I can do it for SSH. We can do it for and we're going to do it for HTTP when we get to the third method of connecting. So I would say SSH console, and here's where we get into if you're using Radius or AttackAct server, right, we would put the name of the Radius or AttackAct server group, but we don't have that. We're just using the local database. So this would be the equivalent, right? If you're familiar with the iOS way to approach this, is I would say AAA new model, and then I would say AAA authentication, and this is where we get into that method list for login, default, right? And I could say local. And if I wanted to be case sensitive, I could say local dash case, right? So very similar, right? But we don't have to say AAA new model. It is here by default, and I'm just calling out that, yes, we're going to use AAA authentication for SSH connectivity to get that console access, and we're going to reference the local database to make that happen. So again, one look here, so we'll say show run include SSH, and show run include AAA. So that is what we need. So now I come back over here, and we say, and where is that SSH command? Did I go right by it? Oh, missed it. There we go. So now I say SSH-L Travis 10.0.0.254 Cisco, and take a look at that. So now I'm in privilege exec, and it worked. So you'll notice I haven't configured a single access list, right? Now you certainly can, but I haven't configured a single access list. We haven't talked about the modular policy framework at all, but this is all I need to have in order to get SSH access. We saw what was required with Telnet, but that is what's going to get me SSH access, right? So again, to review, you set the you set the subnet, right, or the individual host that you want to grant access to on which interface they would be coming inbound from. We can set the timeout, right? That's optional. The version, I would definitely set it to 2. I'd love to say that that's optional, but definitely set it to 2. And actually, we got that command right there. And we need that AAA authentication, and you got to create a local, excuse me, a local user account. All right, so that is setting up SSH remote management to the ASA. Now we're going to look at the third and final version, and this is the GUI, and so you'll actually get to take a peek at what the GUI is going to look like. So they call it the ASA Device Manager, or the Adaptive Security Appliance Device Manager. Provides GUI access to the ASA, and just like Telnet, just like SSH, we need to make sure that we enable the HTTP server first, and then we're going to go ahead and put in what IPs, right, and on which interface are those IPs allowed access. So let's jump back onto our most recent version ASA here with 512 megs, HTTP server enable, and then HTTP 10.0.0, and let's do this, .11, and we'll do a /32. So for HTTP access, and it's actually going to be HTTPS, it's a /32 host, so only 10.0.0.11 will be allowed access via the GUI, right, the ASDM, to the ASA, and only on the inside interface. And chances are, if you don't have a dedicated management subnet, that is the approach you would want to take right here, is to narrow it down, to scope it down to, hey, I know that, Bob is the ASA firewall administrator and he has a static IP address and that is his IP. And so we put that in there to literally say that only that workstation is going to be able to access the firewall via the GUI. So let's make it happen, right? Let's get in here, https://10.0.0.254. All right, take a look at this. Great. So we're going to say continue, and it's going to bring me to a download page. I can install the ASDM launcher, right? Or we can install Java Web Start. So I've already done this installation here, so we don't have to sit and watch me move it around and then, open it up and stuff like that. So I've already done the installation, so let me drop this down and I should be able to get that window, and here it is, right? So here's the Cisco ASDM Interface Device Manager. So I'm going to do a right click. We're going to say Open. And again, this is how you get access to the GUI. So here we go, 10.0.0.254. We created a username Travis with a password of Cisco. I'm going to say, remember that username. We're going to click OK, continue. It's going to load the software. And I've got to admit that Cisco has done quite a bit of work. Okay, so it's loading the current configuration. So we'll give it a second here. Cisco's done quite a bit of work to the GUI, right? And it is a very, very nice GUI. And so you can see here, this is going to be our home screen. It's going to tell me how much flash we've got, how much total memory we've got, single context mode, what kind of device, how long the device has been up, my host name, and obviously, you know, CPU utilization. These are all going to pretty much be flat lines. We don't have much going on here. And you can see we're using 273 megs of memory. So again, it gives us a great view of the device. And more importantly, when we get into remote access VPN, right, whether that's clientless SSL VPN or SSL or IPsec, and then site-to-site VPNs, right, it's going to be a lot easier to come into the GUI because they've got this thing here called VPN Wizards that will literally walk you through step by step if you want to do a site-to-site VPN, or you want to do an AnyConnect VPN, or a clientless SSL VPN, right? All of these things you can literally walk right through the setup wizard and set up. So my interfaces, right? So take a look here. You can see my outside interface, right? We've got all kinds of stuff going on here. And again, with the exception of the SSL VPN and the AnyConnect, we're not going to be spending too much time here with the GUI. We're going to be spending our time on the command line. But I wanted to show you how to bring the GUI up, right, so that you can see what's going on, right? We can monitor things, right? DHCP, client lease information, and you can see here that it's showing who it's getting. Client ID is on the outside, right? That's from this ISR G2 that we have. And so this is all you would need to do in order to access the ASA via the web interface. And so again, to recap, you can do it via Telnet. Don't do it. I'm going to tell you, don't do it. Even if you're coming across a tunnel, I would not do it. Use SSH, right? Use SSH. And when you use SSH, remember, you want to use version 2. Always good to set a timeout value. And whether it's Telnet, whether it's SSH, or whether it's HTTP, this little syntax right here, this telnet with the subnet or the exact IP with the net mask value and the interface on which that traffic is going to be showing up on the ASA, right? We need to have that for all three. Remember, we need to make sure that we have at least one defined user account. And show run include AAA, SSH. Right? We need to make sure we have one locally defined account, and we want to kick on this AAA authentication SSH console local so that it's referencing the local database, right? And again, you would want to do the same thing, AAA authentication HTTP console local, right? Even though it let us log in with just the regular information, we want to make sure that we tie it to AAA. And so now we've got all of that set up. So this is going to take us, now we've gone over some basic configuration tasks. Now we know how to access it for remote management. Now we're really going to have the rubber hitting the road here, because in Module 5, we're now going to set up the NAT that we need for outbound access, which is then going to lead us into a conversation on modular policy framework. And we're going to come all the way full circle back to that issue we had where from the local host, I can ping 10.0.0.254, right? That works great. Oops, sorry, I'm actually on the ASA there. I want to be here. So I can ping 10.0.0.254, but for some reason, when I try to ping over to 209.165.200. I can't remember if it was 254 or 1, it wouldn't work either way. It's not working, right? It's not working. So we're going to come back now. We're getting closer to being able to solve that problem. Why can I not ping through the ASA to the outside interface and get an answer back? All right, well, this is going to wrap up Module 4. So hopefully you've got a much better understanding of what's required to set up remote management access on your ASA firewall. All right, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in Module 5.